All right, to discuss, we're joined by Karyn Maughan, who is a senior legal journalist at News 24. Karyn, great to have you with us as always. They failed, but why were the medical aid schemes here trying to block this report?
Well, essentially what they tried to argue was that the report made adverse findings against them and that they should be given the right to respond to the report before it was released, because of the incredibly adverse, findings of unfair discrimination that have been made against them. We've just seen in the last few hours a number of the medical aides, or all of them who have been implicated, coming out very strongly, disavowing any wrongdoing. But essentially, the judge in the matter simply said that the medical aides, particularly GEMS, who was the party that brought that litigation, had been aware that this report was going to be publicly released since November last year, and as such could not at the 11th hour bring an urgent attempt to interdict its release.
All right, then explain a little bit more. We did hear from the advocate, but how black doctors, black healthcare practitioners and others were being targeted.
I think it's important to remember here, and the report spells it out, Francis, that many white practitioners, because they operate in affluent spaces in the private space, do not need to claim directly to medical aid. Their clients will simply pay them, and then their clients will make claims to the medical aids to get reimbursed for whatever medical treatment they get. That is not the case for black doctors. In many instances, who very often will be operating in poorer communities where they need to get the cost of their patient's consultation and appointment directly from the medical aid. So as a consequence, these doctors are, disproportionately likely to experience these kind of forensic investigations and adverse outcomes. And what this report essentially says is that the rate at which black doctors are being found, to have committed fraud, waste, and potential wrongdoing is disproportionately far higher than that of their white counterparts. And on the version or the reading of the panel and its statistical analysis of the data presented to them, they believe that this amounts to unfair discrimination.
Yeah. So is it just a structural thing, what you're talking about, more black healthcare providers engaging with the medical aids, or it sounds like racial profiling? Was there actually a belief that if you were black, then the providers would believe you were more likely to be committing fraud or something like that?
Well, the interesting thing is that the report says that there's no evidence of direct or discrimination. That essentially the medical aid said, look, we basically use algorithms, statistical services, and basically tip-offs from the public to identify when someone has done something wrong or might be suspect in terms of their transactions, and ergo we cannot be accused of racism. But the experience of the black practitioners who brought this complaint in the first place is very different. They have given evidence of, really when they are found or identified to have committed fraud, waste, or abuse, etc., they are forced into positions because they're so totally directly dependent on the medical aids to negotiate settlement deals, as Sipho pointed out in his story, feel that they're intimidated. They don't have a redress. There is no independent mediation of those kind of issues. And so as a consequence, black practitioners very much feel that there is a kind of dimension that is specifically targeting them, even though the report did not say so in such explicit terms. The report, however, does say that there needs to be some kind of redress in terms of the way in which these things are negotiated, that black doctors, black practitioners are given more power in the situation because they are far more likely, as a consequence of the context in which they are operating, to be the target of these kind of investigations. They need to be empowered to have a far more fair and less oftentimes arbitrary kind of exercise when they are indeed accused or found guilty of these kind of things.
All right, so you said the medical aides themselves are denying they plan to respond. What other responses?
Well, I mean, I spoke to the head of the Black Practitioners Association, who was at the helm of leading this complaint, and she said to me, Dr. Prudence Buthelezi, that she believes Black doctors now have a right to, for instance, demand repayment of monies that were taken from them as a consequence of alleged fraud, waste, and abuse. And she's saying that, she believes Black practitioners have the right to do this. Of course, we've seen the EFF also coming out strongly. They contend that despite the finding of non-direct discrimination, that this is very much a manifestation of sort of structural and systematized racism. And they've come out very strongly against the medical aides involved, and also questioned why the Minister of Health has been so silent on this issue. Francis, remember that when this report was intended to be released in December last year, he requested a meeting with the panel so he could be briefed on this report before it was released. He has not come out. We have sought comment from him in this regard. Zero silence from the Health Ministry. And they're also urging the CMS and the Health Professionals Council of South Africa, who has come out very strongly in defense of Black practitioners, to get far more involved in regularizing this entire process and ensuring that Black practitioners are protected against the kind of intimidatory practices that they alleged within this 2-year inquiry process.
All right, so it sounds like there will be legal pushback. This is set up for a fight. Where to from here?
Well, essentially, the medical aides have until, I think, the 6th of March or March to provide responses to the kind of findings that have been made against him. The public can also respond. I think there are going to be a number of different reactions to this. The CMS, the Council of Medical Services, needs to then decide what it does with this panel's report. It is not obliged to implement any of the recommendations. And there is a distinct possibility that there may be some form of legal review if and when the final report comes out. But I think, this report is very detailed. It's 330 pages long. It does expose a number of issues that require urgent redress, because when you have evidence in an inquiry that Black practitioners have taken their own lives over non-payment issues and the way in which these kind of matters have been treated and resolved, there is clearly a systemic problem. And in a country that is really in grave need of healthcare practitioners, this is actually an emergency that needs profound government redress and profound engagement from everyone involved to correct it.
All right, thank you. We'll follow that very closely. An incredible finding there, and that was senior legal journalist at News 24, Karyn Maughan.